Hi everyone, my name is Megan. I'm an artist here at Say It With Clay, and today I'm going to show you how to make a clay menorah. So the first thing I want to do is talk about what is in your clay kit that you brought home with you. First thing is your registration paper, which is really important. Make sure that you do that. And then we have a list of all the supplies that we have inside of our clay kit. It also has some suggestions for other things that you can use. And then a really important thing that's on here is the YouTube channel, which is where you found this video and other videos. So it's youtube.com/sayitwithclayat-home. So that's important as well. Then we have a couple other things that are going to help you to make your menorah. So we've got a sponge that we can use for smoothing things or for adding water. We have a stick that we can use for carving or poking holes or anything like that. We have a couple paintbrushes that we're going to be using for glazing, which is adding our color to our clay. We actually have some different glazes, a couple different color options for you within your kit. We have some floss that you're going to use to cut your clay. We have a piece of a comb that you're going to use to scratch and attach, putting your clay together. And then you have your clay itself. So, first thing that you do with your clay is we need to wedge it. And I like to stand up when I'm doing this. I think it's easier for me, but it's kind of like kneading dough. So you're going to press it with the heels of your hand and push it away from you and then pull it back. And you're smushing it as you go, smushing out any air bubbles that are in your clay. You can do it the opposite direction as well. Okay, see how it's spiraling because it's getting all that air out. I'm going to do this about 20 times. Once you feel like you've done it enough, you're going to take your floss and you're going to cut your clay in half, and this is the pretty cool part, where if you take your floss, wrap it around your clay and pull it, it's gonna slice it right in half perfectly like that. And the reason why I just cut in half was to check that there are no air bubbles, no holes at all in this. Now that I checked that it's good to go, I'm gonna put it back together, wedge it again a few times, make sure it's all back together and ready to use. When you are doing anything with clay at home, I do recommend putting down some newspaper or something to cover your table so that you don't get it super messy. All right, now that I have my piece of clay, I'm ready to get started. So I wanted to show you one example that's already finished and then show you a completely different way to make it because I want to give you some different options. So this is one way to make a menorah, and this one's already been used. We have the 9 different places for candles and some sort of base. So this is made by actually flattening out your clay with a rolling pin or using something else to roll it out. And I have some suggestions on your paper. But rolling it out into a flat piece, cutting it to whatever shape, and then attaching these parts for the candles. I'm gonna show you something similar, but with a different type of base, okay? So what I would do to get this to be a coil, which is what we're going to use for this base, is I would flatten this out at least a little bit so that you can get a good chunk to start making it into a coil. So I'm going to punch my clay a little. Now that's a little bit flat, I can cut a piece to use and actually make into a coil. I'm going to cut a chunk of this off of here. and I'm gonna use this to roll into a log, essentially. So you can stand up to do this, or you can be sitting. I think the way to get the best even log is to be rolling with your fingertips rather than the palm of your hand, because it's too tempting just to squash it if you use your palms. You want to use your fingertips. You're starting in the middle of your coil and moving outwards. So I'm just going to do a little bit at a time, then maybe rotate it a little bit at a time, rotate it, and this keeps it from getting too square, because that becomes an issue, I know for me at least, with my coils. So you can see it's starting to become a longer log because I'm pushing the clay outward. And we can fix these ends later, don't worry. If you have an area that's getting thinner than another, you can focus on some of the thicker areas. Okay, once you have a thing that is long enough for your menorah, then you can pause, and we're done that step. If you do want to add more clay onto it, you could do the same thing, cut off a chunk, add some more here to make it longer. Or if you want to have a bigger piece to start with, you can smush it all back together. You do need to re-wedge it anytime that you attach, chunks of clay together. So again, there's no more air bubbles in there. So now that I have my coil, I'm gonna actually roll this to make it flatter. So I'm gonna take my rolling pin or whatever other item you have and gently roll down my coil. So now it's flat, but it's still this nice shape. If I want to change the end shape, I can. I could use my stick, or I can just rip it with my fingers and smooth it. If you're using your stick, just be careful that you don't break your stick. I'll probably smooth it with my fingers anyway. Just taking my finger and bring that around the ends, the edges. Any extra little bits of clay I can add to my extra clay that I'll be using in a bit. Run my finger along this part, make it more even. Okay, just like that. Now I'm going to curve this so that it is a smile. And then I need to add pieces to actually put the candles. So I might actually make this a little bit longer so that I can actually fit 9 on here. That's pretty good. But what I'm gonna do to make my candles, instead of this, which looks like maybe they were even like flatter pieces that were rolled around and attached together, I'm going to just make a bunch of balls of clay. So I'm just gonna take a chunk of clay off of my bigger piece and roll it between my hands or roll it on the table, okay, to make that into a ball, just like that. All right, and I'm gonna make 9 of them. When you are making your menorah, you could look at menorahs that you already have in your house or maybe online, get some ideas. These can be done however you want. You can make the base different styles. You can make the candle holder parts different styles, or we can make it very creative when we get to the decoration part, which I'll talk about. So I've got 4, and I actually might make these a little smaller. You can see I started out small, they got a little bigger, but that's okay. Okay, so I've got 5, just a few more. I can see as I go if maybe I need to make add more onto here or make them smaller to make sure everything's gonna fit. 2 more. All right. So now I have all of these. We're gonna see if everything's gonna fit. Yeah, I think it'll just barely fit. There we go, good. So now we're going to do something called scratch and attach, or score and slip, which for this you'll actually need a cup with a little bit of water in it. You'll need your sponge, or a paintbrush, I suppose, or your finger, and your little piece of comb. So what you're going to do is you're going to use the comb first to scratch or score in the place that you want each ball to be. I'm going to scratch it on the menorah part, and I'm also going to scratch it on the candle part. I'm going to scratch it in 2 different directions, and I'm going to make it pretty deep. Okay. Then I'm going to take my sponge, or you can just use your finger, pick up some water, lightly dab it on there, or like I said, use your sponge, lightly dab that on. But you don't want to make it so that you're smearing away the marks that you made, because we want the water to soak into those marks. And then when you attach your 2 pieces of clay, it's going to kind of work like Velcro and stick together. So we have that attached there, and then we're going to maybe blend this together a little bit with the end of our brush or with our finger, depending on how blended you want it to be. I want to get rid of that line. So now it's pretty securely on there. You can do the others. You really need to make sure you are scoring and slipping with each step. If you just take this and stick this right onto the clay, when it dries, it's just going to fall off. So you kind of need to use the slipping and scoring because it's like glue, gluing these 2 pieces together. Like I said, you don't have to do this style of menorah if you don't want to. Oh, I almost forgot the slip, or the water. Maybe I'm going to try to do it a little bit of assembly style there. Might need to add a little bit of extra clay at the end for mine to work. But that's okay. I think I'm going to use my floss to cut another chunk, roll it out and flatten it, same as I did the first one. Okay, and then I'm also going to scratch and attach these ends so I can fit this onto here. Oh, and add water. Really want to blend these here because these are 2 bigger things that are being attached together. I'm going to really blend that with my finger. And then obviously this is way too long, I don't need all that. So I can use my hand or I can use my stick to gently cut this off. And then fix the shape with my fingers. Okay, So now we just have our last one to attach. There we go. Those are all attached. Again, I would kind of blend with your fingers to get them really attached and get rid of the line in between them so that they really stay on here. Okay. But now I'm ready to make the holes for the candles, and then we're ready for decoration. So I would use the end of my paintbrush or another tool if you have a wider thing like this. You could even use the candle itself. You have one ready to go. But all I did was I pressed this into one of the balls of clay and I wiggled it around a little bit, okay, to make it wider. You want to make sure that this is wider than the actual candle because clay does shrink a little bit. So if you have those really skinny candles, they're probably best for this. I want to make sure widen each of those spaces for the candles. If you want to flatten these a little bit, you could, or you could leave them more circular. If it cracks at all, you can just smush that together. You can add a little water if you want. And anything can be cleaned up with your finger. I wouldn't add a ton of extra water to these because the clay is already really damp, and adding more water, the clay won't be able to absorb anymore. So it'll just sit on the surface and kind of be slimy and take a really long time to dry. So there we have those ready for candles, and they would have to be those skinny candles unless you made this a lot bigger. But I do have extra clay, so you probably would be good to go with that. So now that I have the base of the menorah all done, I'm ready to think about what I want to do to decorate it. So I could use some household items, things like forks and spoons, an old toothbrush, anything I have lying around. If I have stamps, those could be really cool. But I want to think about how I can make texture. And you can do this however way you want, but you want to add something else to this to give it some intrigue. So this spoon has a really pretty end to it. Maybe I can use this and press it along the edge of my clay. And I might let it dry a little bit if this is really damp, because it's not going to pick up this texture as well, because it's a very subtle texture. But something like the ends of a fork, it might pick up a little bit better. Oh yeah, that's much better. You can see that, all I did was press that in. Something like a toothbrush. It's got this shape, which could be cool. And you can make patterns like that. I could use this part and make a very subtle texture. See how that looks? You could do this on your extra clay before you do it on here to try out these textures if you wanted. I also have this rounded part, which could be interesting. Maybe I want to put this on the actual candle parts. You can see I did that little bit interesting thing there, and this can also be done all on the inside as well. I could use this scratcher and drag this along here to make something interesting, right? You can also use the ends of the paintbrush that you have. This is great for making dots. Like that. Or you could use the end of the paintbrush to draw lines. Just like that. All sorts of different things you could use to do your texture. The last thing you're going to do is you're going to use your glaze. So glaze is not really paint. but it's what we use to add color to our clay pieces. It turns darker or brighter when we put it in the kiln, which is kind of like the giant oven that clay goes into to be made durable. And what's great is when you return your piece to us all painted, we will add a clear glaze, which will make it shiny once it goes through the kiln. Now, these do kind of mix like paint. So if I wanted a different color than what I had here, and I wanted to mix them together, I could use something like a palette, maybe like the lid of your kit, put some glaze onto here, maybe get some fresh water and rinse your brush in between, dab it on a paper towel or a napkin, get some of another color, mix those together. So I have red and yellow, and that's going to make an orange. When I'm painting my glaze onto my clay, I want to do it very lightly. I don't want to be smushing my brush into the clay. And I want to apply it pretty thickly. You definitely want to do a couple coats, at least 2, preferably 3, to make sure that it's not going to be streaky. Okay. You want to let it dry in between coats. So that means making sure that it gets like lighter and chalky kind of, so that you aren't just smearing the glaze around on the clay. I could do one solid color and then add other colors on top, or I could just leave the base color of the clay, which in this case is going to be white, and do patterns or lines or anything like that on top. So think of this as a very loose demonstration on how to make a menorah, and you can take this and run with it however you want. You can be inspired by this process and be as creative as you'd like with your own menorah. When you're all done, you let it dry a little bit. You would put it back into your kit container and return it to Say It With Clay so that it can be fired and, like I said, made shiny and usable. All right, so I hope that you have had fun with this and are excited to see the final results. Thank you.